So you put 88 kilos on one machine, and the weight on the chain pulling on the actual person can be very different
Yeah.
than on the other machine.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Muscle Minds. I'm Scott McNally, and of course, I am here with the one and only Dr. Scott Stevenson. So, guys, we're doing kind of like a special installment here. We saw this study. It's a study of the belt squat. They have, and I sent this over to Scott and said, "Hey, Scott, what are your thoughts here?" Basically, to start us out, I mean, what we're looking at, the study is comparison of muscle activation of 3 different hip belt squat techniques. They are comparing, let's see, the SquatMax-MD, the Pit Shark, and the Monster Rhino. So, and I'm seeing we get a lot of different variation here looking at these charts and graphs. Scott?
Damn, sciencey stuff is so complicated nowadays, isn't it?
It is, and I'll tell you what, it destroys, in my opinion. It looks like the Pit Shark is not performing as well. This would lead me to believe that the Pit Shark is not a good piece of equipment.
So this is awesome. This is perfect because literally you just looked at the study for the first time like about 40 seconds ago. That's good. This isn't a criticism. This is perfect because you're like, it's all over the place. Scott, help me dig into this.
Yep.
You hadn't seen the study. I sent you the link. This has all happened in like the last 2 minutes. Like I'm lying,
looking
right?
at the chart.
Literally.
Right. Yeah. I'm looking at the chart.
First time, just now.
I'm looking at the chart.
I looked at it earlier today.
The Pit Shark is destroyed. It is not a good piece of equipment.
So it appears. Ah. So we're measuring muscle activation. I think anyone who thinks of that, anyone listening to this, I would presume, probably realizes that the more load you use, the more muscle activation is required to lift said load. So you would think, okay, let's say we got a study here. We want to compare 3 different belt squat machines, apparati, so to speak, and see if there's any differences in the activation, just generally speaking, or across the muscles that they examined there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can. I can start. You've got the study there. I can send you the PDF as well.
Okay.
You can get it from that link that I sent you.
Yes, I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, look at some of those things. So they looked at, let's see if I find the rectus femoris, RF, vastus medialis obliquus, the VMO, the teardrop muscle, gluteus maximus and gluteus medius. They use standardized surface electrode positioning per their methodology. And they had to do a set of 5 reps warm up, and then they did a set of 5 reps where they made the measurements. I don't know if they did an average over those measurements. They said they visually inspected I think they had 14 participants to see if they got to 90 degrees at the knee. Encouraged them to do that, sort of standardize things very loosely. And they went through the 3 different machines they tested, the ones you mentioned there, the SquatMax-MD, the Pit Shark, and the Monster Rhino. So after the second set, the athletes were given at least 2 minutes of rest, then moved to the second and third squat technique for data collection. So there could be a compounding effect there, potentially. They didn't give them 5 minutes of rest, at least 2.
Okay.
So finished, start the thing, you're getting out of the belt, walk across, get to the next belt. You may never have even used this other thing again. But it's the first time they ever used it.
Okay, so this is 2 minutes in between each machine.
That's what it says.
Okay.
Yes, they did 2 sets of 5 reps with a minimum of 2 minutes rest between each set. The first set was just to get used to the machine. The second set was when they made the measurements. So there's just that. But back to my original point that I was heading towards. You would think we're going to standardize the load that's being used by each of these subjects when they're on each of these machines. Well, all I can find to that extent, and maybe I'm just misreading this, here's what there's 2 things. In the equipment, they say blah, blah, blah. They list the source of those. Standard lifting plates were of various increments, 2.5, 5, 10, 15, 20 kilos were used to provide resistance in the amount of the participant's body weight to each lifting technique.
What does that mean?
Resistance, I don't know exactly. what they say later on in the procedures, it's a separate paragraph. Well, it's not a separate paragraph. It's an incomplete sentence that stands alone. That doesn't even end with a period, ends with a semicolon. It says the athlete's body weight, rounded down to the nearest 2.5 kilo increment, was racked for each athlete. Table 1. Table 1 just shows the athlete's the participant descriptive characteristics. So their average weight was 88.65 kilos. That's what, 100, 160, 178. What's about 180? These are like 185, 190 pound folks. So these weren't giants. These weren't monster powerlifters, that's for sure.
Okay.
They used about that. So that was the load they used. That was the load, as far as I can tell, that they threw on the machine.
Okay.
So that doesn't mean that that's the vertical load pulling down on the belt connected to the person. That's just what they loaded the machine with.
Okay.
These are 3 different machines. The one that seems like it's the badass, the one that seems like it's creating the greatest activation because it's got something super nifty about its design, would be the SquatMax-MD belt, which is basically a belt, a hip squat belt
with a hole in the
with a post connected to it. And I looked up the machine; it's a pretty nice design. It's a platform with a hole. The post upon which the plates get loaded vertically, that just loaded onto a vertical pole. Yeah. It has a little bit of a receiver that can be banded down there to sort of keep things in line. But basically, it gets free weight purely straight vertical.
Down. Yeah.
Up and down.
I've never seen this machine. You haven't seen this before either, huh?
I have before, but it's actually quite a bit. It's like what the Iron Mind hip squat belt.
Okay.
That you may have seen me use. They sell a post.
Oh.
You can connect to it. It does the same thing.
Yeah.
Big Dave Smith, who we talked about just the last time we talked on the podcast.
Yeah.
Has some cool videos. He's got one of those, and he did a lot of those.
Okay.
He's done a lot of those. Just gets some boxes set up, and he puts that post. I have it out here in my home gym. You can load the bejesus out of those.
Yeah.
It's just all this is just weight hanging off the belt.
Yeah. So that's just
it's pure free weight.
I see where you're going with this. So
the other two. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, go ahead. Please carry.
Interrupt you.
No. You're getting there now, I think.
Yeah. Well, the Monster Rhino and the Pitch Shark belt both are leverage-based machines. There's a axis of rotation upon which a post that is connected through a carabiner to a chain to the belt to the person rotates at this axis, which is where the weight is. So it's a leverage, basically. It's a seesaw type of lever situation. Okay. Rhino belt's on a cable.
Okay, yeah.
So but we've got a leverage. We've got mechanical situations there.
Right. They're going to be very different than free weight.
So you put 88 kilos on one machine, and the weight on the chain pulling on the actual person can be very different than on the other machine. They didn't equilibrate the weight. They didn't equilibrate the load, at least pulling down. That's the only way I can think of to standardize it. Yeah. There's also issues of the loading curve from start to finish, which would be the kind of the cool thing if like one of them managed to like have a different kind of a loading curve that better matches the strength curve. That's when a machine feels really good. Like where like it's weak where you're weak. That's what people like. You're weak out of the hole. Let's say on a hack squat. So you do reverse banded hack squats.
Yes.
So that it pulls up on you, gives you some assistance when you're down deep. You go all the way down. Ass to grass on the hack squat, and then it's heavier on the top. It makes it more of a quad activating exercise. You can feel that. You have to drive near the end. Yeah, that's badass. That's what bands can do. Chains can do it in a different way. But if the exercise loads in such a way that adding bands or chains better makes the exercise match the person's strength curve. Yeah, how strong you are from start to finish. Then those are great ways to customize those exercises to fit our basic biomechanics.
Yeah, so I'm seeing what you're saying here. So if they use the same amount of weight for each one of these machines, I get it. So I'm on one leg press, and I load up, 2 plates. My leg press here, the Nautilus Explode leg press that I have, it's a heavy leg press. And if I were to load 10, 12, 14 plates on it like I could on a hammer strength leg press, it would bury me. But
Right.
does that mean that 6 plates on this it means that I'm getting more out of it? Does that mean that it's a better machine because I need to use less plates than if I were to use a hammer strength? No.
That's the thing. No. So that, because they did not equate for the actual load on the belt that's attached to the person. You'd use a foot plate measuring device, force measuring device.
Yeah.
You could put that on a leg press or attach that to where you press.
Okay.
And equate those. That strength curve versus loading curve is a more subtle thing, which is what you would think would be what they would be testing had this study been done a little bit better. Is some machines, like, you're like, man, whoever the engineer that came up with this probably has never lifted a day in his life, because this thing just feels awful. It's hard where I'm weakest and it's easy where I'm strongest. It's a terrible loading curve. That's not what you want. What you get is sticking points that rob you of those 3 or 4 grinding reps at the end of a set, that were the ones where you make you feel like you really got everything you could out of that set.
Yeah.
So if they equated the load at some point, let's say the middle of the range of motion on all of these machines on average for the person, based on what the excursion would be from upright to 90 degree at the knee, find the middle range of motion for each individual, equate the load on the chain in a vertical direction that's connected to the belt. You following me? So
I am.
Basically the stress. Then you could say, oh, this one machine, the way that because of the way everything's angled or the way the pulley system's set up or what have you, does a really nice job of evoking basically a maximal activation throughout the full range of motion. It's not like you get to the bottom, like you have to it's 100% effort to get out of the hole, and then it's nothing at the end. Well, your activation would fall off like a rock. Fall off like a rock at the end of the plateau. Boom, it'd just be nothing at the end. Whereas if it's like, oh, it's just I got an effort to come out of the middle, effort at the bottom, effort at the middle, effort at the top. It creates this nice even effort level throughout the full range of motion. That's what you want in a good machine that feels good.
Yeah.
You're like a pec fly is the easiest one I was using. You like a pec fly, you're like, this is easy. And there's a sticking point there. That's not what you want. You want to be able to finish it and bring everything together. Same thing on a leg press, same thing on a hip squat belt, same thing on most exercises. You don't want those sticking points. So a well-designed machine, if they tested and equated the load in some way, would be one that would give greater activation throughout the full range of motion. When you average the activation using the EMG techniques they used here, you'd see greater activation just for that reason. And then, of course, there's a comparison between a squat, a barbell squat, and a hip squat belt. And what you see in the discussion, if you look at the literature, is that generally speaking, there's actually just one exception. This is Matt Wenning makes a hip squat belt machine that didn't fall prey to this. But for the most part, you find that back squats get the glutes more so than hip squat belts. Okay. And that's the bars up on your torso. You're leaning forward a little bit. Your glutes or hip extensors. Makes sense. Yeah. That you do that. So you don't hit the glutes as well with the hip squat belt in general. And that's where, if you even go to the Max AD, SquatMax-MD, SquatMax-MD, like they've got pictures from this study on their site. And the pictures they're showing are in the VMO and the gluteus medius plots that you could pull up if you want with the I don't know if they're in the PDF. I don't know if they're on the link that I sent you. Okay. But if you download the PDF, you'll find it. Okay. And there's an advantage there because that SquatMax-MD, that's the one with the post, basically a belt and a post, and the post is sort of stabilized by some things underneath the platform. That's got the highest activation on all the muscles. Yeah. It's probably because my guess would be because it's relatively a higher load because it's just free weight and there's no leverage.
Yeah, yeah.
Pulling machine. There's no nothing in the way there.
I totally get it, and I keep going back to that because, like I said, my leg press here that I have in the home gym, I can't load nearly as many plates on it as I can on another leg press, like the hammer strength leg press. That's more like the 30 degree instead of the 45 degree. You know, there's different variations, and so with those variations, I guess what I'm seeing here though is this is terrible for Pit Shark. Because I look at that chart.
It's not good PR, that's for sure.
I look at that chart when we first opened the show up, and based off of that, man, I'm thinking to myself, I would never buy a Pit Shark. That's terrible for them, and it's unfair. Yeah,
it really is. The SquatMax-MD folks, I mean, it's smart of them to pull from these plots.
Sure.
It's smart marketing, but it also is marketing that when someone uncovers what's going on, pulls the wool off people's eyes, like I'm trying to do here, you realize that this is not a very well done study. It doesn't equate the load properly. And the interesting thing here is, you check this, the glute max. If you look at, see, I hate it when they do this too. So figures 4 and 5, they didn't plot the EMG activation, the EMG activity measurements on an absolute scale.
Mm-hmm. So
the scales start up at the top, so it magnifies the relative differences. For instance, for the rectus femoris, the scale starts at EMG activity in microvolts of 300 and goes to 600. So the bottom half isn't even shown. So, but what I'm seeing here, if you look at, for instance, on the gluteus maximus, SquatMax-MD versus Pit Shark versus the Monster Rhino, and that one may not. They don't even have. See, I'm surprised this even got published. Sorry. There we go. I'm trying to see where their p-values are. So they've got a p-value. I have to go and look through this. So let's look at the gluteus. Okay. Well, there's no difference in gluteus maximus. That's why, in terms of EMG activity.
Okay.
You look at that plot and you see differences. But the thing is, on none of their plots where they did find differences on the bar graphs, did they indicate that on the bar graphs and then give you a legend as to what the differences mean. So there are differences for the rectus femoris, the vastus medialis, and the gluteus medius. They show those in a different table. But then they have this plot that has no standard error bars on it, and it's got nothing indicating the differences. All you see are the bar plots, and they're cut off at the bottom. You don't know what was different from that. Of course, that's what they have on the SquatMax-MD site. So no difference in gluteus maximus for any of these three, which is interesting.
Okay.
If we look at, so here, imagine let's take another look at this. You're a bikini competitor. You want to hit your glutes more so, and not your rectus, not your quads, your rectus femoris and vastus medialis. That's all we have. We're just going to talk about glute maximus here. Okay. There's no difference between the three at this load for gluteus maximus.
Okay.
But the Pit Shark does not. It doesn't. Let me see. Let me double check the let's just compare the SquatMax versus the Pit Shark. The Pit Shark has less activation in those two quad muscles.
Okay.
Than the SquatMax-MD. So, same glute activation, less quad activation. That's what a bikini competitor will likely want. That's what our wellness competitors in the new division will want. You want the big bootay, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That shows literally that the Pit Shark, relative to the SquatMax-MD, is a better glute exercise.
I suppose it is then when you put it that way.
It sure as hell is, because you get less activation of the quads with equal activation of the glutes in the Pit Shark versus the SquatMax-MD. So put that in your pipe and smoke away, right?
Yeah. Now, if you're getting the same amount of activation in the glutes from either machine, yet it's with the same load, I'm getting really
load on the machine, right?
I'm getting confused now. So if you have that 88 kilograms or whatever it was,
so right, so let's say at a given amount of weight,
yeah,
that evokes a certain amount of gluteus maximus activation, which is compared the Pit Shark with the SquatMax-MD. We equate the glute max activation, you get less quad activation
at that load. But
so hold on.
Oh yeah,
So you do a set.
Yep.
Guess what's going to fail? Or be more likely to fail?
The glutes.
The glute on the Pit Shark.
Yeah.
Versus the SquatMax-MD.
Yeah.
Because the SquatMax-MD is requiring more quad activation.
Yes.
So that's a weak link for you. If that's the weak link for you, and you don't want it to be, you want your glutes to be the weak link, then you want to use the Pit Shark.
Yeah.
Because it's easy on the quads, hard on the glutes.
Yeah.
Now let's do this then. Let's equate the load on the belt.
Okay.
So that might be let's say 100 pounds on the SquatMax-MD, which is just the post, the free bar, the free weight one.
Yeah.
And maybe you got to put 200 pounds on the Pit Shark because it's leverage.
Right.
You got to load it up. Pain in the ass. I don't like that personally because it's fun sometimes to load a bunch of shit on there,
but yeah, so it takes more weight.
10 minutes. Yeah, it takes. You're moving weights around all day long. So if you do that, load it up, you're going to get a much higher glute activation on the Pit Shark when you have the same quad activation.
Yeah.
So assuming that those ratios apply at different loads.
Right.
But the way they tested it is it turned out the Pit Shark and Squat Max, same glute activation, less quads in the Pit Shark. That makes the Pit Shark a better relative glute exerciser because it unloads the quads when the glute max activation is the same.
Well, okay, so initially though, I was starting to think that you just needed more weight, period, because that you would get the same effect if you had more weight on the Pit Shark. But now it sounds like you're telling me that that's not necessarily the case. It is different, that there is a difference in the activation, that you're getting less quad in the Pit Shark, more glute in the Pit Shark, and that balance is different. So even if you were to load more weight, then you would still get less quad than an equal amount of weight on the other machine, wouldn't you?
We don't know. They only tested one load, so they didn't do a load versus activation relationship test here.
Okay.
So who knows? My guess is that the load on the Pit Shark, it was relative to a rep max. Let's say they could have done. You put your body weight on that SquatMax-MD. They might have gotten 10 reps. Let's say you put that same weight on the bars of the Pit Shark. They might have gotten 20. Don't know.
Yeah,
that's my guess. There's less activation in all the muscles except for the glute maximus.
Okay.
It's a little different story on the glute medius. Let me see here. There was a difference there too. So there's something different about how the Squat Max and the Pit Shark hits those two glute muscles as well.
I'm starting to think about it too now, and I do think that there is an element with that style belt squat, and I haven't used the actual Pit Shark brand belt squat, but there is an element of being able to kind of squat back. Do you know what I mean? You versus which I haven't used this SquatMax-MD either, but with that I can see you're just vertical. You're going straight down versus on that cord, you have that option. You can kind of sit into it and kind of squat away from the machine, which I think would put more glute into it for sure.
So people know they can look up. I'm looking at the Rogue site. The Pit Shark is the one that swivels on an axis of rotation, and the Rhino belt squat is a cable apparatus that's set up that runs underneath.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. So both that cable, you got a cable going down.
Yep.
And the cable loops under a pulley and then goes back up to where you load the weight. And if you look at the pitch shark, it's the same thing. Basically, you got it's teeter-tottering about that axis of rotation. So as long as you're like in tight with the belt,
Yeah.
this was a hands-free test. There's no they couldn't bounce stuff with their hands. That would have changed things as well,
Sure.
too, dramatically. But you could literally, let's say you load up the machine with so much that it wasn't going to move. You could, on those machines with the pulley and the leverage, you could lean back all you want. It's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Now, if you did that with the Squat Max, it's free. You'd fall on your ass.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Fall right down. So the angle with which you pull,
yes,
just kind of like when people will do a Smith machine and put their feet out front to hit the quads. You can do that on those machines where the place where the cable or sort of the cable or the chain, whichever you're using, goes in is basically it's set, it's hooked. It's not gonna sway back and forth. It's not gonna swing underneath you.
Right.
Which with the Squat Max it will.
Yeah.
So in the Squat Max, and there is reason to suggest, given these data, that it's more like a free bar squat. So if you want that, you can get that because it is a free weight.
Yeah.
It requires the balance. You can't like lean back into it. So it's the difference between, you see the same kind of thing actually depending on how you do a Smith machine versus a barbell. So I do barbell squats and I get big glutes, pretty much. I've learned that over the years, but I can do a Smith machine. I use my top squat attachment for that too, and I get much more quad and thigh activation, which is what I'm looking for when I'm doing those.
Yeah, I can see that.
To get the glutes anymore. So this is basically looking at a free weight hip squat belt versus a cable or a leverage hip squat belt.
I will say too that I can change the way I stand to make sure that I get more quad out of the cable style machines that I've used. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can do a hip squat belt with a low, like the one that I get from Iron Mind.
Yeah.
You can use a low cable on a cross cable machine.
Yeah. Okay.
And so hook it on underneath you, and you can be like right there next to the machine, just squat straight up and down, or you can step back.
Yes.
3 or 4 steps. So it's pulling you forward, and that becomes like a sissy squat.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did some of those out. It's on my Instagram. People can see this. I did some of those out in my backyard. It's been months ago now, and I just took a band, wrapped it around the tree.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Step back. Remember?
Yeah.
Same thing. So I had to have my body angled that way, and that just makes it a hell of a quad isolation exercise.
Yeah.
You get a little bit of glute and hamstring, but it's almost all quads.
Yeah, that was good.
So that's what you're seeing here in these data. Basically the same thing.
Interesting.
To some degree.
It's a shame though. I feel, I always want to root for underdogs and stuff. And I feel bad for Pit Shark now. You know what I mean? Because like I said, man, I looked at this study. I just saw it posted on an Instagram page, and then I started hearing a lot of other people talk about it. And all I saw was the headline by looking at that study showed me like, oh man, Pit Shark it doesn't work. That's what I saw,
I want to look at that last statement just so people are confused or looking at this. It's interesting because the Monster Rhino and the Pit Shark are just as different as the Pit Shark is from the SquatMD.
Is it?
Really? Yeah.
Okay.
The Monster Rhino is much closer to the SquatMax-MD.
Yeah.
So, and some of that is because the Monster Rhino is the one that's on a pulley and it's a little more straight up and down, whereas the Pit Shark is teeter-tottering on that axis of rotation.
Okay.
So, and this is the first time these folks did this. One of the things we know from the mind-muscle connection studies, what I call them, where they told people, make this into a quad exercise.
Yes.
Or if you're doing this press, make it into a pec, not a delt, a tricep exercise, or make it into a triceps, not a pec, is that you can change the activation pattern. Bodybuilders know that. So that doesn't mean that the Pit Shark is resigned to only being a kind of a relatively better glute exercise than quad exercise.
Yeah.
Because of what this data point shows. Here's the thing too, is that I don't know what that load when they put body mass on the Pit Shark. I've used those before, and I'm trying to think if I were to put. I actually have the video teaser that was filmed when I was at the Arnold Classic this year.
Yeah. That was on a picture?
Have that. Yeah, that video, right. Yeah, I think you've used that a few times.
Yeah.
I don't know how much weight was on there. 5 or 6 plates?
Okay.
Something like that. I don't know.
I don't know either.
I'm trying to think back. I think that might have been a pit shark.
Okay.
It was very similar to that. But if I put body weight on there, so like, maybe 2 plates on one side, 3 on the other, something like that.
Right.
That would be close to body weight. That wouldn't be very heavy.
Right. That's what I was thinking initially.
Yeah. That might add, I don't know, maybe 3/4 of actual body weight.
Yeah.
To what's being pulling down on me.
Right.
So the thing that we have to consider here too is this is different than a leg press because these people are squatting their body weight on top of what is pulling down on them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you compare the load that's added when you use a SquatMax-MD versus any of these other machines,
mm-hmm.
there's free weight versus whatever the pulley is doing or whatever the leverage is doing, plus the fact that you've got body weight on top of that.
Oh, yeah.
So squatting your body weight includes squatting the body weight on the bar plus your body weight.
Yeah.
Whereas leg pressing twice your body weight doesn't mean you're leg pressing twice the weight on the leg press plus your body weight. There's no body weight involved because you're lying down.
Right.
So that's another thing that throws this off.
Yeah.
Or you have to consider at least when thinking about it. So for some people who are just strong as shit, like, people who can squat 3 times their body weight, the body weight is less of a deal. Like, body weight squats are nothing for them.
Sure.
Whereas the pit shark here, this is so low that what you're getting as much as anything is reflective of what they do when they're squatting their body weight, as opposed to what they do when they're squatting with heavy loads.
Yeah.
Because the SquatMax-MD, I have a feeling that was the one that was all the EMGs were. If anything, they were higher. Not always statistically. For the glutes, wasn't the case.
Yeah.
But for all the other muscles, it was higher. My guess that was simply because it was a heavier load. But we don't know. All you have to do, you can get load cells for $100. We used to use these all the time. Rice Lake is the company that makes them.
Yeah.
Like hanging meat, and like you just hook them up to with a serial connection to a laptop. And you just put those in line, like literally the little things are about, the inches long, and they've got little carabiners on them, and you just hook them up, and you can get little scales. There's all sorts of scales measurement systems.
Yeah. All right.
So you measure that, and then you figure out what it was.
So if you were to do this differently, can you list for me what are the things that you would have taken into account, just to kind of sum up everything we've talked about here?
I would have first and foremost equated the load on the belt. So I would have taken whatever system they have involved there, and at least got like a measurement when the subject was standing upright of so that the load pulling down on the belt was equated across all machines.
That makes sense.
So you might use the SquatMax-MD as just like put body weight on there, and that, oh my gosh, yep, that equals body weight.
Yeah.
They actually have some banding stuff that go under there you can add, and that stabilizes. I don't know if they use that or not. You can't even tell. But because the bands are part of that SquatMax-MD system to prevent the thing from swinging all over the place.
Okay, yeah.
The hard things about using your belt squat with free weights is that it'll swing.
Yeah.
So they've got some bands there, but those add load as well. But I would equate the load.
Okay.
So use one as a standard, whichever one ends up being the heavier, and then add weight to the others. So that's the same. I would have randomized the order of the testing. And familiarize them all, first and foremost, so they got used to using these things.
Okay.
Because you run into order effects. So if they would them all in the same way, it's like, oh, I did a belt squat. Should have never done a belt squat before. A lot of people haven't. So they did a set of 5, and the true set of 5, and they moved the next one, like, oh, they've already done a belt squat. They did a set of 5, another set of 5, waited 2 minutes, another set of 5, another set of 5. You got potential fatigue accumulating. Plus the fact that by the time they get to the last set of 5 on that third exercise, which could have been randomized, they didn't say that I saw at least in the study, now they've done 25 sets of belt squats.
Yeah.
Before they do those last 5, or 25 reps of belt squats in 10 minutes.
Okay, so yeah, by the time they get to the third machine.
called a practice effect. Yeah, if there's no randomization.
Okay.
And then it would be interesting to see. I mean, if you're going to do that and bring them in on different days and familiarize them, then pick whatever load you're going to do, and you're going to have to give them some time, like a week in between, randomize the order of this, but do a rep max test with it. See what happens. You could even do. There's all sorts that you could do, like what happens to muscle soreness afterwards. Bring in a couple days. You can do pressure algometry. You can just ask them to repeat the load and give me like a rating of muscle soreness in your quads versus your glutes. Generally, not going to be able to delineate the different muscles.
Yeah.
But you can press on the muscles. You can use it's called pressure algometry. You press with a certain amount of pressure, and you get a pain rating on a little 10-centimeter scale, and say, "Oh, that's about a 4 out of 10." And you can get so that'll tell you what the activation was. To some degree, it'll tell you what was meaningful to people who are using this from a training stimulus or from a hypertrophy perspective.
Yeah.
So you might as well do that,
Yeah.
So that I would standardize the load, so it's always the same. Do a rep max test to see what happens there. I would just I'd watch closely to see what you can follow up on, because you can watch the EMG as it changes over the course of rep max. So you could see what happens. Do they tend to rely more, like if the glute starts off high and then they end up just calling on more and more quads over the course of the set to failure? Then that pattern may differ. Yeah. For whatever reason. Which would be interesting to see. And then you say, well, look, like this started off like the glutes were fully activated from start to finish, or they were the highest activated from start to finish. Probably the source of failure, perhaps, we're guessing, and the glutes were the highest soreness with this machine. Yeah, this is a pretty good glute machine, it looks like, because it was activated all the way through the fatigue test to failure and had the greatest amount of soreness. Yeah. For instance, right now you got a glute. Oh, there you go. It's better than the butt blaster or whatever. So those sorts of things, insights you could get, but they just didn't. I would represent the data differently, give some standard error bars. You need to know which was better than which. Put it on an absolute scale at least so you can see, because when they plot things like that, it's like one of the basics of how to lie with statistics. It's like, so the differences between 110 and 120 look much larger when you start your scale at 100 and one goes to 10 and one goes to 20. Oh, twice as high. Yeah. Right? No, it's not. It's like more like 10% or less. Yeah. So it's less than 10%. So they didn't scale their data, the graphs appropriately, in my opinion.
I didn't see that. I just saw one is not working. That's what it looked like.
Yeah, I know. Right. So this is what people see, and this is why I like to be able to talk about this stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Scott. I appreciate it, and I hope that some of the people out there watching appreciate it too. It's funny because now when I see something, the first thing I did was send this to you, because I thought I'm looking at this, but I know I want to hear Scott's opinion, because I know there's something I'm probably not seeing here, and it turns out, guess what? There was a few things.
Well, here's the thing that you can do. I just took I just typed in the title of the paper. Went to Google Scholar, scholar.google.com, typed it in, found it, downloaded it, and just looked at it. Said, okay, so, if I were to, how would I compare these machines? How did they do it? Like the athlete's body weight rounded down the nearest 2.5 kilogram increment was racked for each athlete. Racked? That isn't even what does that even mean? Was racked? Like that's that, and that other sentence used to the starting lifting plates were used to provide resistance to the amount of the participant's body weight to each lifting technique. That's the most important part of the study, is ensuring that you've got equitable comparison context or situations. It's like we compared body weight squats with 3-rep max leg press and found greater activation with the leg press. It's like, no shit. Yeah. It's a 3-rep max. You don't compare the load and talk. You have to have an equitable load in some way, shape, or form. before you can talk about differences in activation across muscles. So this is not to mention all the issues with EMG, blah blah blah, but there's just so much that can be picked up on and misconstrued and argued about. But if you read the study, like, that's why I looked at it, I'm like, well, that's shite, you know. I'm like, there's not much there really. I'm like, not that it's not good to have done this stuff. I didn't do any. I mean, I should be sitting here like calling them shit, but it was just, my guess is that they just had all these machines and they banged it out, and they could get some information. This would be a great pilot study work right here, and just say, okay, well, you know what? Like, when we loaded up the body weight, we started doing this. We didn't have time to flip it around. Next time we need to equate the load. Yeah, because we didn't expect that on this machine you got to use like 3 times the person's body weight for it to feel like body weight pulling down on them.
Right.
So they probably didn't even expect that was going to happen, because they hadn't used all 3 of these machines. So I can't blame them for that. They maybe got this thing running, they got approval for it, and they got going, and they're like, shit. So I'm looking at this from, hindsight's 2020,
right?
Sitting here as a keyboard warrior, essentially, saying, "Oh, they should have done this, this, and this." It's like, no, it just would have been interesting to would have been better design, and I don't think they'd argue with that. I'll have to look. I haven't even read the discussion, because I looked through this and like, there's not much there.
Yeah.
But they may even address this in the discussion. So I'm not saying that they did or didn't, because I haven't read through it all. I usually don't read the discussion first and foremost, because that's influenced by them.
Yeah.
I read the data, which is the raw information, as best I can get. Obviously it's still filtered through them.
Sure.
Say what was done, and then I try to make up my own mind. I don't even read the abstract a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, because abstracts will lie too. I read, okay, what are they getting at? Okay, good. I'll just skim the abstract, and then I'll go right to the methods.
Yeah.
And try to figure out what went down. And so that's kind of the reverse. Most people were like, ooh, they talked about this. Then they go to the methods and look at the methods. And, oh, that's how they did that. Okay. I always do it the other way. I was like, what actually transpired here? And then I'm going to figure out what I think about that, and then I'll read what they have to say about it.
Okay.
So,
well, thank you for going through this with us today, and maybe shedding a little bit more light that maybe the pit shark isn't as terrible as I initially thought it was.
No, on the contrary. Actually, it might be, for people. Here's the thing: a lot of the belt squats aren't great for the glutes.
Okay, yeah.
And people are doing belt squats sometimes because they've got lumbar back injuries. They can't load the lumbar spine or the spine in general.
Yeah.
So guess what? Relatively speaking, at the loads they compared here, the pit shark, relative to the other muscles, at least for the gluteus maximus, not for the gluteus medius. The other one, monster rhino, was pretty dang good too. Those end up being better, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
The pit shark especially.
Yes.
For the glutes. So that might be the best one for a lot of people looking to use a belt squat as a way to train the legs and the glutes when they can't back squat with the barbell because they've got a lumbar spinal injury or issue or limitation of some sort.
Right on. Yeah. All right,
One
guys.
One for air.
Well, for another special installment here of Muscle Minds with Dr. Scott Stevenson, I'm Scott McNally. Thanks for watching, guys. Thanks, Scott.
Yep.